This video is sponsored by Only Crits. A quick note before we begin. I'll be using terms and examples from D&D throughout this video because they're a useful shorthand, but everything we're going to discuss applies to just about any action RPG. D&D is by no means the only game in town, and we'll be talking about some others on this channel very soon. In a campaign I ran during quarantine, I had an evil cultist villain resurrect a mummy lord, and then the two of them fought the party members who were only 5th level. I was going for the sort of story where the heroes have to fight the villain long before they're the appropriate level, which turned out to be the wrong sort of story beat for that point in the campaign. It wasn't what the players were looking for from the game, but hindsight is 20/20, and that's not really the point I want to highlight today. But during that encounter, the Mummy Lord focused all of her attacks on one of the player characters, just one, and killed her, and then both the villains teleported away. Specifically, the Mummy Lord killed Pippa, the cute little bird monk. She was an Aarakocra, but she was flavored to look like a short little humanoid hummingbird. And this was the perfect character to kill. If I ran the exact same encounter 1,000 times, no matter what the players chose to do, I would go after the same character every time. But how did I decide who the bad guys would attack, and whether or not they would even focus all of their attacks on a single character? I get a lot of requests for video topics, and one that comes up every once in a while is, how do you run a combat encounter? But I actually think that is a bunch of different questions wrapped up into one. We've talked in the past about example combat encounters, and we've talked about the psychology of initiative. Links to both of those videos are in the description below. But this is another aspect of encounters that I know some game masters wrestle with. How do you decide who your villains will attack? Well, for me, the answer is simple. Math. What does that mean? Let's find out together. This video was chosen by my patrons. They voted on this video topic. If you're interested in voting in future videos, join my Patreon at the Fabricate level to donate $15 a month and get access to monthly polls, as well as other awesome content. Now let's get back to the video. A few years back, my friends and I developed a board game called Mortals: Descent of the Gods. I don't think there's anywhere official that you can still get the game, but I've seen some copies on eBay. If you want to check it out, that's a good place to start. But the game was about fighting monsters, and unlike D&D, there wasn't a player to control what the monsters did turn by turn, so we had to figure out some mechanics for who the monsters would attack. We basically had to program a monster-running AI that could be easily expressed in a rulebook, and that would run exactly the same way at every game table. And honestly, I think we nailed it. I'm sure some of these mechanics are similar to other games. I know my friends had some other influences when designing the combat system. So if you think this sounds like another game, yeah, maybe, but I haven't played those games, so I'm going to use our out-of-print game as an example today because I know it really well. Here's how it worked. A monster would always go for the closest hero it could see. If it couldn't see any hero, it would go for the closest hero it couldn't see. If heroes were on two separate spaces on the board that were equally close to the monster, that monster would always go after the largest group of players. If the closest spaces with heroes were both equally visible and had the same number of heroes, then you would just roll a die to determine who the monster would go after. We playtested this game for years, so by now I know that rule really well. To the point where now, anytime I run a combat encounter in an RPG, that formula is still running in the back of my head. So if there's ever a situation where I truly can't decide who a monster will go after, this is what I fall back on. This is my, I need to make a decision quickly, monster math. The monster just goes after the closest hero it can see. If there's a tie, it'll go for the biggest group of heroes. And if it's truly equal at that point, I'll roll a die. Now, none of this guarantees the monster is going to make the best tactical decision. Honestly, rather than going after the largest group of players, most monsters would probably want to pick off the lone heroes. They'd likely go after the nearest, smallest group. But we'll talk about tactics in a bit. Right now, we're building a baseline. We're basically laying out our safety net. We're going to talk about lots of other methods you can use to help make this decision easier. This formula is just my default if I truly can't make another decision. It also serves our purpose as well. Attacking a larger group of heroes means more players will get a chance to do cool things to the monster. And ultimately, that's a good thing. It also means you don't have to deal with attacks of opportunity. The hero they're going to attack is whomever's closest, so there's no opportunity for an opportunity attack. Now, as game masters, we hope we can come up with a more dramatic decision than that, and I'm going to give you the tools to do just that. But if this is the only thing you do with your monsters, then your players will still have fun. Okay, we've established our baseline, but is every monster going to act that way? No. That was a board game. The formula had to be so simple that anyone could understand it, and it could basically run itself at every table. If your villains are intelligent, they're not just going to rush toward the nearest group of enemies. So that's our next question. How intelligent is your monster? If the players are fighting like wolves or zombies or skeletons, that's going to make some of your decisions for you. They're not likely to have the capacity to consider strategy, to figure out that some of the heroes are sneaking around and trying to get the drop on them from behind. If, however, the party is fighting an elder brain and a colony of psychic mind flayers, those creatures are a lot less likely to fall for some basic misdirection. A useful threshold is an intelligence of 10. 10 is the human average in most RPGs. Monsters with an intelligence below 10 tend to have trouble considering strategy and are more focused on the immediate dangers. If that's the case, then you can probably focus on the next couple of questions and it'll make a lot of your decisions for you. However, more intelligent creatures, let's say about 15, are likely to be very clever and cunning. The next couple of questions might not serve you very well in those cases, but some of the later questions will be vitally important. This is like a fork in the road. Starting with the simpler questions, this next one is a question I can often fall back on when there's no obvious answer for who a monster would attack. Who attacked this monster last? This is a question that I can even ask out loud. I'll ask the players if I can't remember. I often can't remember. I often lose track of that sort of thing when running games. But the players will usually remember who was the last person to make an attack on the monster. This question and the next one are extremely useful when your monster isn't very bright. A wolf isn't likely to go after the cleric because they know the cleric can heal people. They'll go for whichever enemy just tried to hurt them. This is even more true for mindless monsters, like zombies, skeletons, or automatons of any kind. The last character who tried to attack this monster is going to be the first target on that monster's turn. Of course, there's a problem with this approach. What if the last player to attack that monster missed? If you say, okay, the Iron Golem is attacking you because you're the last person to try to attack it, the player might quickly say, come on, I haven't landed a single attack on it. Yes, they've tried to attack 3 times, but in their mind, because they haven't actually landed a hit, they can't reasonably be considered a threat. And there are a lot of viable reasons to ignore a player who was the last person to try to hurt the monster, but wasn't the last person to successfully hurt them. We'll tackle some of those later in this video. But how do we reconcile this problem when it comes up? Well, that's where the next question comes in. Who has attacked the monster the most? Now, don't misunderstand me. This might not be the person who has gotten the most successful attacks on the monster. It can mean that, but it can also mean the rogue who only hit once but got sneak attack and dealt 70 damage. This is one that I can't really boil down into a simple standard answer. It's something you have to keep an eye on. Sometimes a player will deal a lot of damage, or they'll just deal consistent damage throughout the fight, and you'll think to yourself, oh, they're definitely the next target. And then on the monster's turn, they'll take their attack on the person who has done the most significant, memorable hit. Now again, that player might say, oh come on, I didn't land my last 2 hits, but you actually have a response now. You can say, yeah, but you're the one who dealt 70 damage in 1 strike. This guy knows you're a threat. Now, that being said, you want to be careful not to commit to a course of action too early. Let's say the rogue hits your character for 70 damage, and you think, dang, I'm definitely going after that rogue next time. But then before your monster's next turn, somebody else does like 55 damage, because they got to take 3 attacks on their turn. Sure, the rogue has technically done more, and done more with a single hit, but should the monsters split hairs like that? Likewise, you don't want to be so focused on the rogue that you haven't noticed that, technically, the paladin did more than 100 points of damage, it was just spread across 2 different turns. This question can be a great way to help make the decision, but it's not without its pitfalls as well. Now, between the past 2 questions, I'll sometimes oscillate between making a decision on one versus making a decision based on the other. Sure, there are issues with attacking whoever attacked last, but it depends on the monster, it depends on who the player is, more on that later, and it depends on what that character looks like. If, they're a big scary threat, then sure, why wouldn't the enemy attack them? So this next question might be the most useful, in part because there are so many different ways that you can answer it. Who is the biggest threat to the monster? The nice thing is, it's possible this question will help you decide which of the previous 2 answers to go with. Do you go with whoever attacked last? Whomever attacked most? Or maybe just whomever's closest? Or heck, whomever's just the most intimidating looking? These are all reasonable answers to that question, especially for a monster with relatively low intelligence. You can absolutely imagine a giant ape focusing on the biggest, most intimidating enemy, or a wolf targeting the nearest threat who's not standing near any other heroes, or a mama owlbear attacking whomever has proven that they can do the most damage, or a gelatinous cube attacking whoever hit them last, regardless of how much damage that person did or did not do. On the other hand, an intelligent monster might have a completely different answer to this question. They're far more likely to target the spellcaster firing fireballs from a distance, or the cleric who can heal people, rather than wasting their best attacks on the barbarian or the fighter. They're more likely to attack enemies who don't wear armor and stand in the back ranks, rather than focusing on the meat shields in the front of the party. If one of the heroes is invisible or hidden, an intelligent creature is more likely to try to seek them out if they're proving to be a major threat. So this question, which of the heroes is actually the biggest threat to the monster, is going to help a lot when setting your priorities. But this still isn't everything. Sure, I've given you all the questions you can ask to decide how your monsters might behave in any situation, but there's another X factor we have to take into consideration. Your players. And more specifically, your players' emotions, and the experience they're hoping to have with the game. Now, before we get to the next few questions, I want to circle back on the option of rolling a die to decide who your monster will attack. It's a great solution when you can't determine who the monster would reasonably go after, or when many or all of the players are viable options. But you don't want to roll every time, otherwise the monsters won't feel real. And that's a challenge. It can be tempting to roll every time, regardless of what's going on in the game. Not just because it takes the decision out of your hands, but because rolling dice is fun. Especially if you get your dice from today's sponsor, Only Crits. Only Crits has a wonderful mystery subscription dice service. I've talked about this before, but they sent me another mystery set, so I'm going to reveal these dice live on camera for you right now. Here's the set. Ooh. These are cool. They're like dragon scales. They're like blue, but they've got some cool red through them. Oh man, this set is so cool. And it's metal, which I don't think I really mentioned. These are definitely dragon dice because they're sort of a bluish green for the scales, but the red running through them is really cool as well. The red could be like fire, or for the red dragon, or it could be blood, but also the numbers themselves look like gold, which is really cool and really appropriate for something that reminds me so much of dragons. No, Oreo, these are not toys for you. These are toys for me. And Only Crits has agreed to sponsor this video. If you visit onlycrits.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK, you can save 12% off of your order. And another percentage of your order goes to me instead of going to Only Crits, so if you place an order using my link and my promo code, you're directly supporting this channel. Once again, that is onlycrits.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK. Thank you so much to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. The next question is one that I tend to ask when my monster is a major enemy, or just a particularly dangerous or iconic monster. And it's a question I'll even ask out loud at the table as I'm reviewing the monster's stat block, their spells if they have any, and while looking down at the battlefield. I'll ask, how evil do I want to be? First of all, asking it out loud doesn't serve any purpose other than just being very funny to me. Although maybe it also prepares the players for the fact that I'm about to take off the kid gloves and potentially do something nastier than usual. I don't know, I literally have no idea if that's true, that's not why I do it. But this is a question I take seriously. Listen, we all know that the players are usually hoping the fight will go a certain way, and then they'll employ certain strategies to try to make that happen. They'll put their melee fighters up front, cast preparation spells and buffs, cast greater invisibility on their best damage dealer with the weakest armor class, all that sort of thing. And all of those things are designed to funnel the encounter toward a specific result, shoring up their weaknesses and reinforcing their strengths. But your monsters don't have to play by their rules. They can cheat, and they can get nasty. They can send all of their attacks toward the wizard because they know the wizard can't take the hits. They can focus on bringing down the cleric because they know the cleric is their healer. They can avoid wasting attacks on a raging barbarian or wait until the druid has dropped wild shape before targeting them with really powerful stuff. If you're feeling especially naughty, they can even counterspell your party's healing and resurrection spells. But are these things evil? Well, I don't know. Maybe the better word is nasty. Whether or not the monster is literally evil, let's set that aside. Is it evil for a monster to do the smartest tactical thing? No, of course not. Your players might also do the smartest tactical thing. I mean, mine often don't, but any of our players could, and that doesn't make them evil. But when your villain does it, it can feel unfair. It's not unfair. At least you as the GM aren't being unfair if your monsters fight dirty. It might not be a fair fight, but no RPG encounter needs to be a fair fight. But when you do these things, they can feel kind of nasty. Now maybe this is the kind of thing you do in every encounter, but I don't tend to go that hard every time, particularly because I play with a lot of newer players and I'm often trying to curate an experience for them. Also, I'm just not an especially tactically minded GM. That has rarely been one of my strengths. But this is a dial I can turn up when I'm feeling particularly devilish. I don't mind getting extra evil when I think it's the right time for the campaign, or it makes sense for that monster. But why is this something I even wonder about? Why wouldn't I go evil whenever I wanted? Well, the next question answers that, actually. My final question is this. Which player will have a bad time if I attack them? I don't always worry about this. This is a combat game, people know what they signed up for, but it is something I keep an eye on during the game. If a player has missed every swing they've taken, yes, logically I can argue that the monster wouldn't see them as a threat. But if there's no one else in range, why wouldn't the monster attack them? Well, sometimes they will, but sometimes having the monster attack the player when that player hasn't rolled higher than a 7 all night means the player is going to have a crappy time. And it's avoidable. When a hero goes unconscious, why wouldn't a monster focus on killing them? Well, logically, you could rationalize that by having the monster address the other threats who are still standing. But emotionally, sometimes killing that player is going to lead to a bad time at the table. I know some GMs write down their players' hit points for each game. This is something I tend to do for in-person play as well. And having someone's maximum hit points in front of you, behind the GM screen, is useful when answering this question as well. It's not the end of the world to one-shot a player with a powerful attack, but you at least want to know you're about to do it before it actually happens. And having at least some idea of their hit points helps with that as well. Otherwise, you might end up killing somebody super quickly in a way that you didn't intend, which will also lead to the player having a bad time. Not just because they got knocked unconscious, but because they were knocked out in a way that you didn't intend, which might have been totally undramatic or ill-timed. Maybe it happened just as they were about to try to use the cool new power that they've been really excited to use ever since they leveled up several sessions ago, and knocking them unconscious will actually really bum them out so hard it would sour the entire mood of the table. Now again, don't misunderstand me. Sometimes I don't worry about this too much. I mean, sure, this is a game, but we all sat down to invest in a world and create a believable story together. Sometimes I cannot reasonably justify a monster retreating or picking a non-optimal target. Sometimes the story has led to a scenario where it is frankly unbelievable that the monster wouldn't specifically go after that character, take them on personally, even to the point where they're striking them while they're unconscious. Sometimes there's literally nothing else the monster can do. Every other target is out of reach. And sometimes I don't worry about it because the players made their choices knowing what the consequences could be, and death was one of those consequences. But I've talked before about how players can choose to make choices that might not make sense for their character, but that will help the entire group have more fun. And the truth is, we as game masters have the same option available to us. Yes, we can always play our monsters as authentically as we can, but sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's going to lead to somebody having a crappy game night. That doesn't mean that we throw away the reality of the game world, but we can still change our monsters' tactics. We're in control of what our NPCs and villains do, and we can always come up with some sort of justification for them to do the non-optimal thing. We don't have to do it all the time, but when you're trying to avoid ruining someone's night, I think we do have the authority to change a monster's immediate motivation to suit a different course of action. So to see how these questions can work to create a terrific encounter, let's go back to the example I mentioned at the top of this video. A cultist resurrected a mummy lord, and the two of them fought a 5th level party. The group included a cleric, a paladin, a bard, and a monk. This was a few years ago, so I don't remember every turn of the screw, but I remember that the fight was, fairly intense. Within a few rounds, pretty much every member of the party was either unconscious, paralyzed, or stunned. And one of the goals of the fight, the reason they were facing someone so dangerous, was because I wanted to make this personal for the players. I wanted them to hate these villains, so they would feel compelled to hunt them down. And I realized during the fight that the best way to do that was to kill a player character. The how wasn't a problem. The Mummy Lord could hit the heroes with a rotting fist and deal 9d6 plus 4 damage, and she could do that in between turns as well, thanks to her own legendary actions. I actually missed a detail. If the rotting fist attack brings a character to 0 hit points, that character's supposed to die and turn to dust, but it was fine that I missed that detail. I would have ignored it anyway if I'd remembered it, because I could just have the Mummy Lord punch someone to death while using spells like Hold Person or Spiritual Weapon to control the battlefield. The question was, who was I going to kill? Well, through the process of elimination, who was I not going to kill? Well, the cleric, first of all. She had just gained access to Revivify, although I didn't actually know if she'd prepared it. I was hoping she had. Either way, she was the party's only chance of bringing a dead character back to life, and so killing her would have been extremely nasty. She also already had a personal connection established to these villains. The cultist and the Mummy Lord were both servants to an evil god who was the direct enemy of the cleric's god. Now, you could argue that these villains would definitely go after her because she was a priest of this goddess, but that wasn't true for 2 reasons. One, for lore reasons, the Mummy Lord hadn't even heard of the cleric's goddess. And 2, for reasons that are not worth getting into, the party was dressed up as spooky ghosts and skeletons. So the Mummy Lord and the evil priest wouldn't have seen any holy symbols to draw their focus, so the cleric wouldn't seem like more of a threat than anybody else. And also, the cleric was played by my wife, and this was her first D&D campaign. She had no plans to continue playing if her character died. She was still feeling out D&D and hadn't committed to this as a lifelong hobby. It was a way to socialize with some friends we didn't get to see often enough, especially during lockdown. So, killing her would have meant that she was definitely not going to be excited to keep playing. She also wasn't in melee with the Mummy Lord. So you can see how a few of these questions contributed to that decision. Who's the closest? Who was the biggest threat? How evil did I want to be? And would attacking the player mean that she was going to have a bad time? The Mummy Lord wasn't going to attack the Bard because, based on my memory, the Bard was far away and hadn't landed a hit. And again, the Bard was played by my sister, who also wasn't committed to D&D as a lifelong hobby. Who is closest, who's the biggest threat, and who will have a bad time. All of those ruled out the bard. That left the paladin and the monk. Both of them were in melee, both of them had done some damage, and both of them were players who I'd played with for years, and who had both been dungeon masters themselves. I knew that, honestly, if either of those characters died, even if it wound up being a permanent death because the cleric may not have prepared Revivify, the players would be fine with it. So how did I decide? Did I roll a die? No. I figured out how evil I wanted to be. Both the Dragonborn Paladin and the Aarakocra Monk were really well-developed characters. The Paladin was blustery and couldn't admit when he was wrong. If he called the goblin a kobold and he got corrected, he would say, "Well, that's what we call them where we are from." And yes, he also spoke with a thick Eastern European accent, which added to the effect. It made him a compelling character to listen to. But he also wasn't a fool. He'd instant-killed an earlier enemy by pushing them through a portal, something that player has done twice in 2 different campaigns. I need to stop putting enemies next to portals to the water plane that they are actively focusing on keeping open, because my brother-in-law keeps pushing the enemies through the portal and killing them. The monk, on the other hand, spoke with an Irish accent, was considerate of others' feelings, was patient and indulgent with the paladin's nonsense while still not letting him off the hook for the moments where he was a fool, and, as I mentioned, was a short little hummingbird-looking girl, so she was adorable. I knew that she was basically the most beloved member of the party. So of course I killed her. Then, when the bad guys teleported away, the heroes scrambled into action. The cleric and the bard frantically checked their spell lists, and thankfully, the cleric had prepared Revivify. I docked the party 300 gold retroactively for the material component for the spell, and then they were able to resurrect their ally. And this leads me to my final conclusion. Monsters aren't math. Encounters can't be pre-programmed for the optimal experience every time. I can't give you a formula that you can use in every situation for the perfect outcome. This is just a handful of questions you can use as tools to better decide whether to put more pressure on the injured or unconscious player characters, or whether to go after the unexpected targets, or whether to simply strike at the meat shields who came into melee to scrap with you. And another question you could ask, although this is really part of encounter design, but something we could ask is this. What is the purpose of this encounter? Is it just to deplete the hero's resources? Is it a fight to the death? Are the characters fighting over a MacGuffin? Are they just trying to keep the heroes from doing something, or keep them from interrupting something that the other villains are doing? The bad guys don't know whether they're in a random encounter or a boss fight, but you do. You can use the narrative to determine how far to take things, and whether you want to kill the innocent bird monk to motivate the players, or if instead you are going to kill the cleric first, because the monster knows that the people wielding holy symbols are usually going to be able to heal or revive their friends. You know, assuming the cleric isn't currently dressed up as a spooky butler. The point here isn't to handle every situation the same way, with all monsters acting identically in combat. Instead, keep some of these questions in your mind, and use them to help guide you on which tactics you want to use in your encounters. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was useful. I also know that combat encounters are still a daunting topic for a lot of GMs, so if there's something specific you'd like to hear me tackle, let me know in the comments below. I can also admit that I'm constantly learning new things, which is why I'm so excited to read the Keith Amon books that were gifted to me by one of my viewers, Squidly1. These are all about combat tactics, so hopefully soon I'm going to sit down with these books, and then I'll almost certainly wind up making another video or two talking about combat encounter advice. Until then, I have other videos coming out on this channel every Monday and Thursday, so make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can see these videos as soon as they come out. You can help me financially by signing up for my Patreon or buying me cool stuff off of my wish lists. One of my patrons, Stephanie Moss, just bought me the RPG Humble Bundle. That was super kind of them. It got me a bunch of awesome RPG-related ebooks, and I'm really excited to dig into those. Especially one of them that I'd already been eyeballing for a future video. You'll probably see me talk about that one pretty soon. If you can't support me financially, that's perfectly alright. You are always welcome in my Discord server. That is a really great place to find groups and share advice and insights into these games. And if you want to stay up to date with what I've got going on, you can follow me on Twitch and sign up for my newsletter. Make sure to check out this video here about advice for building a combat encounter. It was a lot of fun to make. Until next time, play fair and have fun.